You jib a jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. You jib a jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.
Welcome to the weekend. I'm John Caldera, president of the Independence Institute. You're watching Independent Thinking. We're almost halfway through the session. Oh, thank God. Actually, it's a little more than a third, I think. So I thought we'd bring in a couple people for the midterm report from the Denver Business Journal, one of those Rocky Mountain News survivors. Glad to have you here, Ed Sealover.
Thanks for having me on.
So you're one of like 300 reporters that still has a job.
In the country?
In the country.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Well, then you ought to move over to television where it's all cheese and milk and cream. Eli Stokols from Fox 31, glad to have you here.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, you're the only guy that didn't need any makeup.
You're always here for me, so I figured,
That's
know,
good
come
point.
in when you asked for an interview.
All right, let's start off. We're between a third and a half of the way through the Colorado session. Any big surprises that's popped up?
I don't know that it would be a surprise, but I think the level of nastiness you've seen, it goes beyond what you normally see during even an election year. I mean, there have been really bitter battles. I've seen more people getting gavelled down during committee hearings than I've ever seen before, and I think it surprised me how much the legislature has chomped each other's throat.
Well, you know, the gavel is in the hands of a Democrat at this point, so Democrats own all the gavels and all the committees. What are they gaveling down?
Well, they're gaveling down, in some cases, people who...
I mean, Doug Bruce isn't there anymore. What do they have to gavel?
No, and there's been nothing quite like that. But, I mean, I've seen people who've come up to give testimony on tax exemption bills that wasn't exactly the bill, getting gavelled down and told that wasn't what they were here to listen to. I'm seeing the fights, really kind of shouting fights between committee members on various things. I think the longer debate goes on some of these bills and the higher tension it is, the more it's really fraying people.
And there's a pretty good partisan streak here in that the Republicans are doing what Republicans do well, which is be cohesive in a minority. When they're in the majority, things fracture pretty quickly, but you know they're holding strong.
They are, and I don't think it's a surprise at all. I'd agree with Ed's assessment that it's been incredibly contentious and feisty, and you've seen people being gavelled down, lawmakers, the Senate president having to tell Senator Mitchell to step back and calm down a little bit. I mean, there's some personal tempers. Almost. I mean, it's close to that. But at the same time, I don't know if that's a surprise. I mean, we knew these things were coming. The tax exemption fight sort of just spilled over, and that's what's getting ink. And as you said, the Republicans stand in firm opposition to that. And it's funny, you know, you watch these people and they have speeches, they have lines that they prepare, and they get up and they go off, and then they go back to the back of the room and they're chatting with their buddies back there and across the aisle, and they're saying, you know, what do you think of that? So a lot of it, when they're on record, is for show, but that's what gets the ink. That's why Ed and I are down there. That's what those are the sound bites we're looking for.
Politicians making statements for show.
It's shocking.
It is shocking that there's gambling in this establishment. Let's talk about these exemptions. As we tape this show, 9 of them have become law. My favorite one, of course, and the one that hurts me the most, is removing the sales tax exemption on candy and soda. Now, I've got a 7-year-old daughter, and when I tried to explain this to her, that the governor is going to raise taxes on candy, she said, and I quote verbatim, "Daddy, that's crazy. Parents, it'll cost more, and parents will have to buy less, and kids will have to throw more temper tantrums." Verbatim quote, and she's dead on. These have been nasty fights. What's it all about?
Well, what it's all about is balancing the budget, frankly. I mean, there's a $1.3 million shortfall in revenues for next year's budget, and the governor's office and the JBC, the Joint Budget Committee, have scoured through and tried to find what they can to cut, and they decided this is where some of it's going to come from. About $150 million of it's going to come from 11 tax exemptions. 2 more are still going through the legislature, and that businesses, to use a phrase that has been used over and over, is going to have to share in the sacrifice that the state is sharing in. Well, you know, they're cutting $260 million from education. We can take $150 million in business tax exemptions as well. And the Republicans are saying the shared sacrifice isn't there. This means business will lay people off, and we'll be seeing more people seek state services.
And we're seeing, let's see, there's a candy tax, there's a tax on energy, there's a tax on restaurant supplies, paper plates and napkins, there's a tax on removing
agricultural
the one,
products,
on agricultural
bull
products.
semen, don't forget that one.
You know, and once the bull semen tax exemption went away, I mean, I can't afford it anymore. I'm trying to find a substitute. how's the fight looking?
Well, I mean, I think it's easy to be outraged, especially if you're a business owner and your business is candy or your business is online sales, because this is going to have an incredible impact on your business. I think that message has clearly gotten out, and we've heard that message. I think there was one press conference where you had state employees and public employees come in the building, say, hey, we've already sacrificed. We haven't seen a pay increase. We've been furloughed 8 days. We're getting a 2.5% pay cut next year. And you start to...
Does anybody say, wait a second, under Ritter, we've got, what, 3,000 more employees than we did before?
Well, I think the number is closer to, what is it, 2,000? That number's been back and forth and debated quite a bit. But yeah, there's been some growth, and I think that's the card the Republicans have played over and over again, is that, hey, you've expanded government, and now you're hurting business rather than scaling back government.
I think the one that's going to be the most troublesome is not only the software tax, but also the online sales tax. And they're trying to figure out, they can't force Amazon up in Washington State to cut them a check and be the collection agency for taxes in Colorado, but they are going to ask them for Amazon to write up an invoice and say, here, Mr. Sealover, you bought $500 worth of products. Here's what you really need to be sending the state and sales tax revenue. I'm imagining when people get this at the end of the year, get their tax bill from Amazon, they're not going to be too happy. Yeah,
but don't forget the caveat in that. In addition to having Amazon send people this little note saying you've got to pay the state, they're also asking Amazon to send notes to the state saying, oh, by the way, so-and-so bought this much worth of product from us. They owe you this much. So when you get the note from Amazon, there's a note going to the state saying John Smith owes you this much, and you could be, if you're not paying, the state could come after you.
So this will be a nice little tattletale system. So since they're not going to enforce it, they can't get Amazon to collect it. Amazon will have to tattletale on what I buy, and guess what? I'm not paying the sales tax. Nobody's going to be paying the sales tax.
Well, it's tough, and that's what businesses that do online sales in Colorado are just going to leave. Right. We've done stories on that at Fox 31 where you have entire businesses, 20, 30 employees, and they say these jobs are gone because we're not going to do this business in this state. You have farmers out there on the eastern plains of the state that have these big, I mean, we're not talking small quantities. They're buying a lot of agriculture products. So the tax on them is big. You can understand the outrage from these specific businesses, companies, these industries that are sort of being picked out because there's 100 of these exemptions and credits on the books, and only 13 of them were proposed, I think, by the governor's office and the JBC to be these loopholes to be closed. So you can understand why those folks feel like this is a little bit arbitrary, even though we've heard from the governor over and over again, this isn't arbitrary, this is a balanced approach, and we're not killing
my
business.
issue with this, and I've said it over, let me say it again, is that I don't mind having a change to tax policy that's going to give them more money with one simple thing. If they follow the law and ask the people first. That is, and Senator Raleigh Heath sat exactly where you're sitting, and I said, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we asking? He said, it's a crisis. There's no time to ask. And I said, and if there were time to ask, you'd ask permission? He said, of course not, because we're elected to do this. The Colorado Supreme Court has made it clear that they're not going to stop and enforce Tabor on this one. So there's really nothing stopping the Democratic majority from bringing these forward, is there?